Good morning, or good day, family of faith. Welcome to the Henrico Ministers Conference live share. We want to greet you in the name of Jesus Christ on behalf of our president, Reverend Dr. Zenora Manson, who is not here at the moment. We just want to say welcome. We thank you for sharing with us, whether you're in your homes, whether you're on your jobs, even if you're listening to us in your automobiles. We want to say welcome. And I am so excited today to just share with you some wonderful women and men of God who just are rich in wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, and dealing with real issues and granting us right now strategies. Let me introduce them if I can. We have joining us today the Reverend Dr. Kim Ridley, pastor of the Light Community Baptist Church. We also have Reverend Dr. Diane Mosby, pastor of Anointed New Life Baptist Church. We have Reverend Price London Davis, pastor of the Mosby Memorial Baptist Church. At this moment, they are here. We also have one of our beloved brothers who's just experiencing technical difficulty at this time, and that's Reverend Dr. Kenneth Dennis, pastor of the Greater Mount Moriah Baptist Church. And we just hope that if everything gets worked out, he can join us in a little later. Let us go ahead, if you will, and just talk for a moment about some of the things that we're dealing with in this time and in this climate. The COVID-19 is still running rampant. Unemployment is rising. Worshiping format is being questioned. Social justice and equities and police reforms are still needed. Inequities in education, housing, jail reform, and healthcare continues to exist. Vote by mail concerns and virtual education are being discussed. However, people are becoming weary, emotionally drained, fearful, and stressed, while others are disturbed because there is a need for solutions. The question I have for you, panel, could you share what you believe needs to be done for those who are struggling emotionally and mentally to remain positive in the midst of so many negative circumstances? And I'll throw that out and we'll ask Dr. Ridley if you would start and lead us off.
I think everything that you mentioned, Pastor Martin, is critical. And I think everyone is dealing with those emotional feelings of becoming weary. And I think that the way we cope with that is different for every individual person. And I just want to wrap it up by saying self-care. I think we've had enough time now, if we're really in tune to what's going on, to figure out what our triggers are and to figure out what might be helpful and healthy to deal with those triggers. And so each individual person needs to give themselves the grace that we so often extend to others. I think in this season more than ever, we need to extend grace to ourselves. For me, what I found that's helpful, in times of frustration, because even those of us on the panel, ministers, pastors, we go through some of the same feelings that you mentioned that everyone else is going through. And I think for me, what I found is of course, we can talk about those spiritual disciplines, right? Praying and meditating and writing and those kind of things, but also just some of the practical things to help us holistically, right? Like walking. Walking has been very helpful for me, listening to music and just those things that give me a little bit of joy each day. Start looking for those moments. And also just to kind of wrap my comments up, don't be ashamed to get help talking to somebody. For some of us, it's okay to just call up a friend or to just call up a family member. But for those of us who need it, even clergy,
that's right,
to reach out and get somebody that you can talk to that specializes in that, it will bless us. And I think in this time in particular, we have to learn how to care for ourselves.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Dr. Mosby, what do you think in terms of the emotional and mental stress and how we can deal with it?
First of all, I want to say that I really appreciate and I agree with a lot of what Dr. Ridley has already offered. I would like to add to that, that sometimes we need to learn how to establish healthy boundaries for ourselves as well. Oftentimes we feel like we have to say yes, that we have to show up, that we have to do. And in this season, I believe God is retooling us and showing us that, we don't have to be present at everything. That there are times when we need to allow ourselves to establish healthy boundaries and be okay with that. Sometimes I think that we do healthy boundaries and then we feel guilty about it. But, like Dr. Ridley said, unless we are intentional about our self-care, we'll find ourselves burning out in the process of trying to help someone else. And I'm not just talking about clergy. I'm talking about family members.
Right.
I'm talking about brother-sister relationships. I'm talking about it all. And so definitely healthy boundaries. The other thing that I would like to suggest is that we limit ourselves about watching the news and the social media platforms. Sometimes we allow ourselves to get oversaturated. Everything is played over and over and over and over again. And if you allow yourself to sit and watch that all day long, it will definitely affect our psyche. It'll affect our emotional stability. It will just affect how we process and deal with life. And the last thing I want to share as we wrap up is that, we all have happy places. And we need to, find our happy places in this season and go back to them intentionally often. If that means a ride down to the beach by yourself, if your happy place is in your car listening to your music, wherever your happy place is, don't feel ashamed to go to your happy place more than once a day if you need to, as often as you need to make sure that you take good care of yourself.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. That's awesome. That is awesome. So, Dr. Price, what would you like to add to this conversation about emotional and mental fitness?
They've said everything.
Reverend?
Don't start.
But what I agree with Dr. Mosby and Dr. Ridley, and one of the things that I would just kind of bring all of that together when I'm thinking about how we connect with those individuals who are experiencing those emotional trials and going through moments of pain and despair. One of the things that I want to find out is I want to engage in a conversation to see where they are and how they're doing from a perspective of mental wellness, emotional wellness. So it begins with a conversation in terms of how do we understand our people and even ourselves. And then that conversation then moves to what are you connected to? What are you listening to? Dr. Mosby said it. Are you listening to the news 24/7? Are you connected to folks that are kind of in places where they'll bring you down or take you into rabbit holes? And so from the conversation to connection, I need to know that there's going to be some help, that I do not have to go through this alone. And that correction really is to all of the circumstances that I'm going through. It's a correction that says to me that when I'm connected to positive external sources, when I'm connected to the eternal, and understanding that God is not through with us, me, or this situation, that we will come out of this pandemic. And so the correction, just as Moses, who doubted himself, Moses, who was trying to figure it out, Moses, who was trying to make things, trying to walk away from all of his duties and responsibilities when God had called him. The correction is that, no, I've got somebody who is there and is going to meet you where you are. And that help is going to be found in Aaron. Excuse me.
That's the church saying amen. That's the church saying
Amen.
Yes,
Somebody was going to take a text.
Right.
Right. But that conversation, the connection, and then that correction, and knowing that we must be, connected with each other. We must understand that we are in this thing together, and we're not in it alone.
In this time of social distancing, do you find it difficult to provide that type of care for your members being pastors who are oftentimes charged with the pastoral care of membership. What innovative ways are you being able to connect with your members during this time of social distancing? Please share.
Well, one of the things, if Dr. Mosby, Dr. Ridley don't mind, one of the things that we are doing at Mosby is for the last month or so, we have been engaging in what we call Rolling Sundays. And Rolling Sundays is where we meet at the church after our service, virtual service, and we're in our cars. We got the van going. We got a caravan of people, and we're going to individual members' homes, and we're honking, and we've got little care baskets for them, and we're letting them know that we are here, that the church and its mission and vision is still being carried forth. And, we're spreading some joy and love to those people who may not be able to get connected virtually, right? Mm-hmm. May not have the Wi-Fi, may not have the technology. And so we go to them. And that's what the church is about. We are about reaching out and continuing to care for our members in that way.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
And we've done something very similar as well. We call them drive-by parades. We have visited our members. Deacons and I have gone and personally stopped by and taken gift cards as well. But I also find that, some of the old-fashioned, good old telephone calls. I mean, technology is wonderful, but sometimes people just want to talk with you. Sometimes they just want to hear your voice. And so I have been intentional about not just the deacons, but pastor as well, making those phone calls to our members and letting them know that you are thinking about them, you're praying for them. And those telephone calls have blessed me just as much as I hope it has blessed them. But those phone calls have allowed me to hear some of their concerns and what they are dealing with and what they are concerned about, to be able to pray with them, to let them know that the church family is still standing with them, and then to be able to respond to some of those needs that I would not have necessarily known if I had not had the opportunity to talk with them.
That's right. And I ditto on what Dr. Mosby and Dr. Price Davis are saying. We have been looking at different ways to connect with people, because everyone has a different way that they connect, and navigating that has been new, right? Because you don't know who feels comfortable with the technology until you put it out there. So we've been utilizing conference calls for some of our meetings. We've been utilizing Zoom for some of our meetings and Bible studies. We've had what we call Light Connect, which is when people can just come in and we just do check-ins, check-in calls, check-in Zooms. I also have been using the telephone. And as mentioned before, it's a blessing because, as people come to your mind and you can give them a call. There's some days when I just go in the office and I'll go down a list of a particular group and I'll just call, check in. Hey, how are you? Text messages. We've had some of our members go to our graduates' homes with balloon arrangements to congratulate them for moving up from one level of grade to another. So we have been putting together a lot of different ways to make sure that our church family knows that we love them. We've also been giving them ways that they can connect with us. Some of them new ways, as well, certain phone numbers that they call and certain people. And our diaconate has been awesome extension of what we're trying to do to keep our congregation connected. Because as you all know, preaching behind the screen, you don't really know who's there. So you have to do some extra things, to make sure that, because pastoring is so much more than just preaching.
That's
it's so much more than this teaching. It is about caring for people. And to the extent that people allow us to care, then we're able to navigate that successfully.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. Thank you. You've given us some great nuggets to go on: self-care, spiritual discipline, setting boundaries, healthy boundaries, looking and creating those moments of joy and going to those happy places, and limiting the negative media that we listen to. You all have just blessed us as pastors. Caravans, drive-by parades, and just getting on the phone and doing an old-fashioned phone call.
That's
can
it.
make a difference to so many lives.
Yeah.
You know, talking about what's going on, even right now, voting during this presidential election that is coming up. Um, there are purposeful strategies designed to slow post office delivery of mail. America's fundamental right to vote is being undermined, in particular, vote by mail.
Mm-hmm.
So some of our voters are becoming discouraged because of what has happened, even in the previous election. How it is that Hillary Clinton can win the popular vote and still lose the whole thing. Uh,
Yeah.
what would you say to those who are disheartened or are becoming discouraged to still cast their vote because their vote represents their voice? What would you say to someone who's disheartened about casting their vote and encouraging them to cast their vote? Dr. Mosby, would you lead us on this one?
Certainly. First of all, I would share with them that no vote is a vote.
Mm-hmm.
And we need to be very mindful of that. That if we choose not to go to the polls, we still have made a vote. And that vote ends up being for the incumbent that's already in the White House. Our forefathers, we already know, paid an awesome price for us to have this privilege to be able to go out and vote.
That's
We
right.
stand on their shoulders, and it would be an abomination for us not to take this liberty to go forth to have our voices be heard. And so, if I had to say anything today to anyone who's being discouraged right now about what's going on, is don't get caught up in what you see and hear. Be caught up in what the ultimate goal is. And that happens in November. That
That's
if you
right.
don't go to vote, you still vote. And if we
Mm-hmm.
can get that in our heart and in our minds, I think that we surely can make a difference in November.
Dr. Price.
Well, I ditto everything that Dr. Mosby said, and I would just say it like this: I really appreciate last week in the Democratic National Convention and hearing our former president, an adult speaking in full sentences. That was
Come
appreciative.
on.
Come
Come
on.
And one of the things that he said that resonated with me is that when we get discouraged, when we find ourselves in places where we just want to crawl underneath a rock and say, I'm done, I'm through, we need to remember. We need to remember our ancestors.
Mm-hmm.
Remember what God has done through our ancestors. And I think from that remembering comes that release, which ultimately brings me to a place of freedom to help me understand that I've got to continue this journey. I've got to make my way to the polls. And so that remembering brings about a release that ultimately brings about a renewing, I believe, not just within the individual, but within our faith communities and within our communities at large. And so it becomes important for us to when we're feeling down, to really recall and say, no, I've got to keep pressing forward.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Dr. Ridley, what do you have to say regarding discouraged voters?
I think to add to what my colleagues were saying, let your frustration be your motivation. Um, I think all of us have some level of frustration about the way things are, whether it's the way that the COVID crisis has been handled, um, the pandemic, whatever it is that has bothered you. Use that frustration as your motivation to go and vote, because I believe that we all want change. You cannot say that you want change and not do your part to make change happen. And I think that's what the vote reveals. You know, we are fresh off of the passing of John Lewis. Many of us have seen, I believe probably all of us on this call and those watching have seen at least one snippet about the sacrifices that he made, even if we don't want to catch a hold to the ancestor piece. That has been something just in 2020 where we were able to see how he basically gave his life for the cause of voting rights. And
Absolutely.
even his last stand was there in DC to make sure that we did our part, and the love letter that he left. One thing that I did think that was very telling, I don't know if you all have seen the show, Michelle Obama's show Becoming. It's a documentary. And one of the things that really struck me was when she was riding in that car and she shared the disappointment that she had towards the vote. And she says, I'm not quoting, I'm just summarizing. She said, it's one thing to go and vote for the person who's in the White House now. She said, my issue is with those who didn't bother. After
Right.
they spent all that time to
Right.
really renew and energize young, old, black, white, all cultures, it takes all of us together to make a difference.
That's right.
So use your frustration as your motivation and do your part. Do not sit home. And it's interesting that Dr. Mosby said no vote is a vote, because I did have that in mind as well. So I just wanted to add to what you all were saying with that. It's so important. If you've never voted, if you've never taken it seriously, this is the time to take it seriously, because our lives literally depend on it for the next 4 years.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Let me throw out a question that may not necessarily be on the script, but I think is on my mind, and that is, you oftentimes have people who say that the church should not be involved in political situations, and the church should not speak about political situations. What do you say to people who question the authority of the church, and in particular the Black church, relative to politics and not having a voice?
Right. I think the prophetic voice is a relevant voice.
Yeah.
You cannot be in a pulpit. You cannot have any type of, if you're talking about in whose authority do we come? We come in the name of the Lord, and we come because of the calling that we've been given by God. And so when you look at the prophets and you look in your Bible, you will see that there were people who dealt with political issues all the time. The whole reason why Elijah had to go and deal with widows was because the government won't support them. Right. The whole reason he met some of the people and did what he did was because these prophets were liaisons between what the people needed and what the government was able to provide. And so if we are calling ourselves prophetic, we have to speak to those things that are relevant in our society. And the political issues are relevant to our society, meeting human needs and making sure that our next generation is taken care of. So I don't see there being an issue. It all has to come together. Now, I do know that as a pastor, I cannot tell somebody who to vote for as a pastor, but I also have to be human enough to, I don't hide my personal views as an individual. And so we do have to make sure that we do our part and be prophetic in our work.
Yes. And also we have to be Christ-like in our walk. And if we are Christ disciples, then following the examples of the Savior, who was always speaking for the marginalized, always speaking for those who have been disenfranchised, it's our responsibility to make sure that we are giving the people a word that speaks to justice, that speaks to wholeness, that speaks to right and righteousness. And if we're not doing that, then our moral compass is off. And we can't lead where we are not able, where we are not willing to follow. And if I'm going to be a Christ follower, if I'm going to be a Christian and a disciple, then that's my example. And so I say that, we should always be speaking to the marginalized, the disenfranchised. We should always speaking about justice, and we should always be thinking and speaking on moral character.
Bless you. Dr. Preisner dropped the mic.
Luke 4:18. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Right?
Yes.
Speak to those marginalized groups, to free those who are in bondage, and to let your life speak in that way.
That's it.
Thank y'all for encouraging us. Thank y'all. What has oftentimes become political now is the virtual format, coupled with the deadly pandemic and the challenging times that are affecting our school systems. um, administrators, students, parents, caregivers, daycare, civic leaders, and churches are all wrestling with the reopening of public schools.
Mhm.
In addition to safety concerns, all of us are deeply concerned about the academic success of our children due to the fact many parents with minimal wage jobs have to work and will not be able to assist their child with virtual school.
Yeah.
In other words, there are going to be a lot of children that may be left at home by themselves.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And the ultimate question is, to our viewing audience, can you offer any strategies, any resources you believe the churches can do to be an assistance to them? And in other words, how can the church fill this void and fill this gap? And talk about even possibly some of the plans that you may be looking at doing as schools are opening in the next few weeks.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I'm gonna ask Dr. Davis if you would lead us off on this one.
Sure. So this is it's a hot topic, and one of the things that I would say with regards to what we're doing at Mosby in terms of helping our kids, the kids in our communities, our local. We have two schools that are immediate to us. Where it first starts off by convening a meeting and convening the church and getting consensus that this is what we need to do, that we need to address these issues. Now, there are so many issues, but which ones do you address? And I think you need to be able to come together as a church to understand what resources you have as a body, what it is that you are willing to do for the community, so that convening leads to a consensus about what we do. Everyone can't do everything.
That's right.
That's right.
That's
We
right.
can come together in different communities of faith, different organizations. And so from that convening and from that consensus, there is this connection. And so I know within the last couple of weeks, our servant leader for our young people has convened us and brought us together and begin discussing these issues about how we address the families and the students within our own congregation and within those that are within our community. We are on phone calls and we are connecting with NAACP. And we are connecting with Virginia Department of Health in terms of how do we make sure that we are being safe in this moment and providing space? Because one of the things that the NAACP is trying to do, in particular with the Henrico chapter, is speaking and reaching out to the communities of faith about how what space do you all have that is available that we could possibly utilize. So, we're talking about different pods, right? Of kids and having being able to be socially distanced, being able to provide the necessary resources. So, and I'm blessed and privileged because I have some educators that are on that team who are able to speak from the Richmond public schools perspective, that is able to speak from Henrico's public schools perspective. And so bringing all of those resources together, compiling and curating those resources to be available to our families and making sure that we're walking with them in this moment. I think things are changing so rapidly that you really have to kind of walk one day at a time and to find out what it is that's needed and then convene and figure out how do we address those needs.
Yeah.
Dr. Ridley, what
Well,
are you doing, and what do you think can be done?
Well, I speak to this issue as a mom of a college student and a mom of a high school student because as a mom, I understand some of the things that we have to navigate as parents when we're looking at our children going back to school, right? But I'm also from a pastoral perspective. One of the things that I can just add, a lot of the things that Dr. Price Davis shared are also um, some of the things that we've been talking about. But I would say for anyone who's interested in helping, get the information. One thing that we've all been doing, I think, is plugging in to find out the facts and find out the needs. Of course, you start in Jerusalem, which is your own church, finding out. We have a awesome children's ministry that's reaching out to on a regular basis to our parents of the little ones because sometimes they just need to talk. Everyone's trying to make these difficult decisions, and we need to find out what those needs are, what resources are necessary. Me and my husband went to Glen Allen when they had the meeting about reopening to, again, get information. Because once you start to see all the issues on the table, you can appreciate how difficult a decision it is for the administrators, parents, and everyone to decide. And as Dr. Davis was saying, how to do it in a safe way. So we've been working with Sister Davis, who our church is in Henrico, but we've been connecting with her in Henrico to find out about how we could utilize our space to be one of these pods. There are a lot of questions that go along with this because one of the hindrances, if we want to bring it up, of some of the things that churches could do is we're still trying to avoid a lot of gatherings because we still want to keep our folks safe.
Yes.
So as was already mentioned, we have to figure out how to do things in a way that's going to be safe, utilizing our resources in a way that will be beneficial, but also not crossing a line where somebody would feel uncomfortable to do that. So it's very delicate. So I would just say, get the information, start with the needs in the church, and then find out how your building and your budget can support what's going on, because with all of the adjustments that need to be made, there may need to be some money that's put toward that. And so all of those things really need to be considered, but we have to do what we can.
Yeah.
Thank you. Dr. Mosby.
I'd like to add a couple of things. And thank you, Dr. Davis and Dr. Ridley, for your comments. We kind of sit in a different place because we worship at a school. And right now, with the schools being closed, that even puts a different dynamic for us as a church of being able to gather. But one of the things that we did early on before COVID that I have found to be very beneficial, and I would like to make this suggestion, is that we adopted a school as a church. And so building the relationship with the principal, identifying needs within the church, within the school, how we as a church might be able to come along beside them to bridge the gap of some of the areas within that particular school that's needed has been, I believe, very beneficial for us as a congregation to be able to share and to give, and to also be a blessing to the students and the teachers to be able to give. And so I would suggest, and I would definitely like to put it out there as a charge. I think we have more churches than we have schools. What would it look like if a church in every area adopted a school? Multiple churches adopted a school. What kind of impact could we make, even if it just means providing resources in this strained season that we're in, where so many people have been laid off, so many people without jobs, income situations? What would it look like if we could pool our resources and adopt a school and provide those resources for those students? Dr. Davis said it. We can't all do everything, but we sure can do something. And I believe if we are intentional in heart and in spirit and in action to seek out what we can do, I believe that we can make a very great impact in our school and in our communities. The second thing that I want to say, let's look at some support group for our parents. Look, can I just say, I was on Facebook the other day and came across one of my parents who has 3 little ones at home. They were navigating, went back to school in Hanover County. She was home virtually trying to get those 3 organized. And she just stated on Facebook, I need help. I'm freaking out. I don't know what to do.
Mhm.
I don't know how to do all of this.
Yeah.
And it did something to my heart. It says we've got to find ways to support our families and
That's right.
support our parents in this new situation that we find ourselves in. Dr. Davis and Dr. Really both alluded to it. It's changing daily.
Mm-hmm.
The instructions that come home from school are changing daily. The
Yeah.
requirements of what needs to be done, the instructions from the teachers, and everybody doesn't have all of the same resources.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
So what can we come
But if
together
we
to do?
right, would
What can we?
if we all come together
Yeah,
Right.
as
yes.
communities of faith,
Our faith.
I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
What
the sky is
the
truly
sky
the
is the
limit.
limit. It is the
Hmm.
limit. And I believe that if we all come together and do our part, and I believe the conversation with a principal, a
Listen,
church
that's what
and a
I was going to
principal.
say. I was going to say
Hmm.
that as well, because when we're talking
Yeah,
about building relationships, one of the first, we've
yeah.
been in our location on Azalea Avenue for, it'll be 8 years, either 7 or 8 years. And one of the first things that I set out to do personally was to meet the principal of Henrico High School,
Yes, ma'am.
because that school is right there. And right before COVID hit, every single year, we have a supply drive for the
Yep,
school,
yep.
because they have a pantry and they put those items in there.
There
And
you
I
go.
have seen two principals at Henrico High School, and normally they are shocked when somebody reaches out to say, how can we help
Yes,
you?
say it,
And
Dr.
so
Ridley.
we have been able to provide, and it's so interesting that before sanitizer became scarce, back in January or whatever, we helped that school re-up on their supplies. And our church
Mhm.
family was, bringing in glue sticks and sanitizer and things like that.
Yes,
We
yes,
did pancakes for them, for the students when they're
yes,
about to take their SOLs. A team
yes.
of us will go and do things. And so that's a way that we can connect. And I know these are different times, but if
Yeah,
we just have some of these conversations with
that's
people
it.
who can tell us, again, finding out the needs and finding out what
Exactly.
you can do reasonably to meet
Yes,
those needs,
yes,
and
yes.
I think that's
Yeah.
just it's just really key for us as the faith community.
And may I add one last thing? The
Sure.
other piece is communication.
Mhm.
Oftentimes, people don't know what to do or where to go because they don't have the information. And, if we can use our platforms to be able to provide community based information about where there are resources.
Mhm.
There's so many churches right now that are giving away food. But
Mhm.
you would be surprised at the number of people who don't know. They
Right.
have no clue that there is
Mhm.
free food being given away. And so
Mhm.
we can use our platforms, our churches, our bulletins, our live streams, our Facebook pages, whatever the case may be, to get the information out that these
Mhm.
resources are available, that these community-based opportunities are available for people. That I think is another way that we can be a blessing.
That's right.
Wow. I think we've all been encouraged, and I pray that all of those who participate in churches, pastors, and leadership of churches, that you would take some of the suggestions and go back and sit down and see what you can do in this season of pandemic to prepare your church to be a place that will provide care and indeed structure for our children
Mhm.
as they are attempting to learn. The greatest fear is to have a generation left behind
Lord have mercy.
Mhm.
based
Yeah.
upon this pandemic and the lack probably of education that they may receive. And so
Mhm.
I think it's incumbent upon us to maybe begin to take the lead in making sure that our children get what they need
Yeah.
and providing the support, whether it's tutoring, mentoring in this time, or just a listening ear to help them get through. Because I believe they're going through so much as it is now. They can't
Yeah.
They
see
are.
their friends, they can't hang out and talk, and so their social environment is totally destroyed.
Mhm.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so,
And even for our teachers, Pastor Martin, even for teachers who
Yeah.
are in our congregations, I've had conversations with teachers, even in my own church, who have been before the pandemic. They're so exhausted trying to
Mhm.
do what they do,
Mhm.
and not having whatever resources they feel like they need, whether it's emotional, financial, or what have you.
Right.
We can also look for ways to support our teachers so that they can be stronger in doing what they love to do. So many of our teachers love to teach,
Yeah.
but the number of changes that they have to endure, and the underfunding and things that they have to go through,
Mhm.
they are also looking for some respite. Somebody to say, "Listen, we got you." So if you can't
Yeah.
support the kids, try to support the teachers,
Yes.
and see
Yes.
what you can do to help empower and encourage them. Because I
Yes.
think if no other time, parents of young children have realized the importance of their children's teachers during this pandemic.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
when we have
Yeah.
to homeschool our kids, which I didn't have to do because my kids are older, but for those, we understand how valuable our teachers and administrators really are.
Yes.
And one of the
Definitely.
things, if I may add, Dr. Ridley, one of the things, Pastor Martin, that I would encourage our churches and our families to do, reaching out to our teachers. Each school I know in the Henrico district has community school advocates,
Resource,
Yep.
yeah.
Yep.
community resource advocates
Yep.
Hmm.
that speak to those issues with our families and connect them to community resources. And I know one of the things that we have done in Mosby this year, we were very intentional in making sure that we were locked in with that community
That's
school
right.
advocate,
That's right. Yeah.
and find, just keeping our hand on the pulse
Mhm.
of the school. What do you all need? How
Yep.
can we
Mhm.
support you?
Yep.
And so we did, and that's a start, and that's a way to stay
And
connected.
Dr. Davis, once they know that you're really interested in helping and
Hmm.
that it's not a gimmick, because we don't come
Yes.
That's
onto
right.
platforms like this all the time just to
Hmm.
spray, what great churches we have. But a lot of the stuff
Right.
that we do is being done consistently in the background. And so when you talk about getting that community advocate, they will reach out to you for some of those needs that nobody will ever know that they can't get help with. For example, one of the things that our advocate reached out to us about was people who were living in hotels. And sometimes, even as pastors or religious leaders, we don't even identify all the issues that people are having. So they had all these
Hmm.
food places that were available for pickup. You remember
Yeah.
after the
Yeah.
pandemic?
Yep.
But
Yep.
there were some families in hotels that
Hmm.
couldn't necessarily get to those places. And they didn't just need food for an individual child, they
Mhm.
needed food on the weekend for these families. And
Yes.
so our church was able to go into our pantry, prepare bags, and those families were blessed who lived in
Mhm.
hotels. And
Mhm.
those are some things that go outside of what we normally think, but it's community. These
Right.
folks are in
Right.
our
Right.
community,
Right.
and it doesn't matter whether they come to your worship service on Sunday, they're
Mm.
part of your community. And if you
That's right.
have it and you're able to provide it, and to the one family that came up and they were in a van, and we were just putting those, waters and bags of food and things that they could take back.
Mhm.
I mean, tears in their eyes. They were outside of the realm
Hmm.
that was considered
Hmm.
to be normal, but they
Mhm.
still
Hmm.
needed
That's
resources
right.
to make sure
That's
that their
right.
family ate. And so
That's
Yes.
right.
I agree with you that tapping into some of these resources, again, that know the needs. We don't know
Yes.
all the needs, right?
Yes.
Right.
And then
And
to find out how you can do it, because again, we can't do everything, but if we all just do our little piece, then everyone will
It's a
benefit.
powerful impact.
right.
It's a
And
powerful
Indeed.
Feed
impact.
More is another great organization to connect with.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
As you were talking, I was thinking about the fact that when Jesus feeds the 5,000,
Mhm.
Hmm.
the resource is from somebody who's not in
Come
the
on.
circle.
Come
That's
on.
right.
It's
Yes.
not the disciples.
That's
Right.
right.
It's somebody who's outside of the circle
That's
That's right.
right.
who
That's
That's
right.
has
right.
something
That's right.
that the
That's
And
right.
was
Lord can
willing to
bless
share it.
and
And was
use.
That's
willing to
right.
share it. Yeah.
And
Yep.
so maybe we ought to be looking to reach out and find those other streams
That's
that,
right.
that can help and assist us. I'm grateful for churches, like St. Paul's and Cedar Street that are giving out boxes
Yeah.
for the community. And I believe some of our churches pick up from them
Yeah.
and help to distribute in our communities. And
Hmm.
places like Feed More and just so many partnerships. I think it's just important to partner. I want to throw out one last question before we leave, and that is simply, um, church is different now, and everything is mostly virtual or at a distance. Um, I want to say, even though we miss fellowship, the hugs, the sharing of the word within the sanctuary.
Mhm.
The power of choirs ministering, and the tradition of gathering for weddings, even funerals, and other ministry programs. What are your plans look like going forward with reopening church? What do you think church is going to look like for you in terms of reopening?
Mhm.
And I'm gonna throw that one out there to Dr. Mosby.
Thank you, Dr. Martin. One of the things that has been very important to us, and this happened definitely pre-COVID, was to identify who the church is. That the church is not the building, the church is the people. And being a transient church, that has been so ingrained into our DNA, that we recognize that wherever we are, the church shows up. And so, as we have moved forward in pre-COVID, during COVID, and post-COVID, some of the same things that we have been doing, we're going to continue to do. The drive-by parades, the telephone calls, the providing the care packages, practicing the ministry of presence, and making sure that people know that you care, that you show up for them, not just in the sad times, but you show up in the celebrations, and you show up in the everydayness, allowing folks to know that you care about them and that you are with them in the season, through the season, after the season, by the season. We're all in this thing together. And so just being present with people, I think, is definitely key to allowing them to know that we are the church, and that when we show up, the church shows up. And so even in the structure moving forward post COVID, on the other side of COVID, we recognize that we definitely we're going to have to keep an online presence. We can't go back, definitely cannot go back to just meeting inside the sanctuary. I mean, this has proven to, I think, most of us and all of us, that there is a need for this type of opportunity in the virtual platform to be able to share the good news of the gospel. The other thing is, for us, we're reevaluating, our order of worship, because we have been condensed in the virtual platform. Do we really need all of that in the physical platform? Are there some things that, may not necessarily be of need in the Sunday morning worship experience, that won't take away from the worship and the context, and the need for connectivity, and the need for the gospel moving forward? And so those pieces are going to be important for us as we move forward. But definitely just keeping those things in mind, that, when we show up, we're the church. If we show up in the Walmart, the Wawa, the Starbucks, the parking lot, that's where the church is. And that's an opportunity for each one of us to be
Church
able
at
to be a
Starbucks.
blessing. Yeah, in the Starbucks. That's my friend right there. It was the Starbucks girl right there. I'm not the Starbucks girl, but I know where to find her. But definitely just keeping those things in mind, that the ministry of presence is so powerful. Just showing up for somebody is so powerful, and people need to know that you care. I think if we do those things, the church is going to be in a good place.
Dr. Ridley, what are your feelings about reopening, and what do you envision the future to look like? Dr. Ridley, if you can, you muted by accident, I think.
Can you hear me
Yeah.
now? Okay. One of the things I had to get really clear on early, Pastor Martin, is what our responsibility is and what people's responsibility is. When I say us and people, I mean as far as leaders and religious leaders or pastors. And our responsibility when we want to reopen our churches is to make it the safest environment that we can. We know that COVID is no respecter of person. We know that there have been many things that have been said about it, but we know that social distancing, wearing masks, and sanitizing is what we can do. And so I believe that once we make a decision, at whatever time we decide to open, there are going to be some folk that don't feel comfortable coming into a building. Right. So I can't get wrapped up in that, because I know that no time to open is going to feel like it's the right time, because we've been under such um, 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 challenging situations with COVID. So many people have lost loved ones, and that invokes fear. So many people have heard those stories, and that invokes fear. Our role is to make our buildings, those of us who worship in buildings, to make them as safe as we possibly can. What that would look like for us at the Light Community Church is making sure that our seats are separate, making sure we've already had a sanitation company come out, a professional sanitizing company to come out to change some of the way we do things. There is no passing out of bulletins. There is no passing around an offering tray, which means we have to make investments in those things to keep us safer, such as an offering box where people can put a lot of people don't do paper offering anymore. They do it electronically. Helping people in our churches to keep themselves safe, which means we have to make our buildings conducive to that and be okay with the fact that it might not look like what it used to look like, right? One thing we all know is we don't have these long services anymore, right? Somebody on the chat is going to say amen. They're going to type it in right now. We don't have those long extra things. And as Dr. Mosby was saying, we've learned how to cut back on some of the things that we realized was fluff, right? We give what we can give. We keep the environment as safe as possible. We give the people the gift of grace and freedom to decide when they want to come back in the building. But when they do, we want to make sure that our place and our processes are safe for them. So that's what I would say as far as what we will do when we open back up, because the future is still uncertain.
Yes.
We don't know if we ever be able to have, hugging fellowship time and all that kind of stuff. I mean, so we just gotta mark it as we go.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Dr. Davis, would you like to add anything to this discussion?
Dr. Mosby and Dr. Ridley summed it up well. And I would just conclude in saying this. One of the things that we have been talking about and discussing in our reopening meetings, one of the vision that I believe we are to go forth with at Mosby is that we need to have a mindset of reopening with the whole person in mind. The question is asked of Jesus in Matthew 22, what is the greatest commandment? You need to love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, body, and soul. And then you need to love your neighbor as yourself. So how do we open the physical building, right? We do all the things that Dr. Ridley was saying. How do we make sure that we are taking the necessary precautions to ensure that our members are safe, keeping a sound mind?
Yeah.
Because just like Dr. Ridley said, there's some folks that said, Pastor Davis, I love you. I love Mosby,
right?
But I'm not coming back too soon.
No, coming back.
And so we've got to take that in consideration. We've got to take the mental and emotional wellness of our members into consideration as we reopen, and we need to keep them safe and to give them a sense of, yes, this is still my church home. Even though I'm not able to be there physically, I can be there in spirit. So we focus on the building and going back in, but we focus on keeping a sound mind. And we also focus on making sure that everyone is cared for by doing the things that we've been doing, the Rolling Sundays, going out and checking up on people, making phone calls, and ensuring that when we do go back into the building, that we are in a good place. So I think it's a matter of how do we not just get back into the building, but how do we continue to build the people in this virtual?
That's it. That's
sure
good.
that we're doing all that we can.
That's right. That's right.
Because I think one of the things that we have been challenged to look at, and I'll just speak for myself, what this pandemic did for a lot of us was it raised up those things that we were doing well as a church. But if we're honest, it also raised up those things that we needed to do differently.
Yes.
And so there's been a lot of, if we were just, and I know we don't have time, but we had to navigate those things that we needed to do differently. And now when church looks at reopening, we have to look at not either or, but both and.
Both and. That's right. That's
right?
right.
And
So
we've
it's
even
not going to
talked
be
about a
either,
hybrid
it's
model.
not going to be either we're in the building or we're not. We have to
Mhm.
now look at ministry on both tracks.
That's
What
right.
does caring for people virtually look like?
That's
If
right.
we have a family from another state that wants to
Mhm.
connect with us,
Mhm.
so we've
Mhm.
been actually exploring even some of those options of what does caring for people virtually
Yes.
look like.
Yes. Yes.
People that may never come into our building because we have gotten so used to the energy of people,
Yes.
right? And being able to see. Now we have to kind of think outside of the box. And for a
Mhm.
lot of us, we've had to realize, hey, we got to grow in some of these areas and we have
Yes.
to, navigate some different stuff.
And make some concession, as you said, Dr. Ridley, for those persons. The word told us to go ye therefore,
Therefore,
therefore, and and
therefore.
and make with disciples and baptize.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as we're looking at this virtual experience, even for Anointed, we've had some persons who've joined us from other states already. So
Mm-hmm.
it has pushed us and pressed us to look at now, how do you minister? How do you disciple? How do you encourage? How do you walk with persons who, like you said, may never walk
Me
inside
never.
the building?
Mm-hmm.
But their needs are the same. Like Dr. Davis said, the whole person still has to be ministered to. And so it challenges us to really seek and look at how we are operating as a church, and
Yeah.
how we are operating as a body of Christ, and
Right.
how we are ministering to each other, whether we physically see each other week to week or we are online with each other week to week. What does
Mm-hmm.
that look like, and how do we begin to make those that creative space that we can minister and minister effectively across the lines?
Yeah. One thing I'll say, and that is that this pandemic has definitely shaken the institutional church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
Come on.
but can we be honest to say the church is alive and well because
Yes, sir.
those who are a part of the church are still giving to the church?
Yes.
Mm.
Yes.
And I'm not just talking financially, but I'm
No.
talking in many ways. They are giving in such wonderful ways that,
Yes.
whether it's help, whether it's time, whether it's volunteering. And
Yes.
so if you are a church member and you're out there listening to us tonight, I just want to say to you, we thank God for you. And
Thank
Thank
I
you.
God
know
for you.
that your pastors and your church, they're thankful for you and for all
Yes.
that you do. And I want to let the pastors know that hey, we're thankful for you, and we bless God for you, for the work. And I know it's stressful, not knowing sometimes how things are going to work out, but we are grateful, and we pray that something has been said and done on this evening that would bless your life and that would benefit you richly, so that as you proceed forward and go on, you might have just a few nuggets of wisdom or understanding of what somebody else is doing. I need to just shout out a few folks out there. They're on Facebook chiming in. They're saying, well said. They're saying creative care for people.
That's true.
Someone out there has put out there that the East End Center, Voter Center on 9 Mile Road is closed, is not open. That is a concern, and we're definitely going to look into that and see what we can do to help that out. And wow, Pastor Smith just put up there a powerful piece. I don't know, we might have to get to that on the next one, he said, and maybe this is just something for folks to think about. How
Mhm.
do pastors help parents stand against that which is being taught, which is destroying the innocence of the children, particularly in the area of sexuality?
Mm.
Pastor Smith, we got you. We're going to hit you on the next time when we come back, as we take an opportunity just to share with you real issues with right now strategies from the Henrico Ministers Conference. I'm going to kick this thing to our president, Reverend Nora Manson, as she shares with you a few words.
Wow, what an awesome job discussing real issues and right now strategies. Returning to the sanctuary, virtual school, your vote, your right, and finding the light in 2020. We want to take this time to say a personal thank you to Reverend Marcus Martin for serving as our moderator and the Vice President of Henrico Ministers Conference. A special thank you to Reverend Kenneth Dennis, Reverend Price London Davis, Reverend Dr. Diane Mosby, and Reverend Dr. Kimberly Ridley for a phenomenal job. We want you to know that the Henrico Ministers Conference wants you to know that we are designed, we have been created since 1960 to encourage one another, to pray for one another, but also to serve as a light of hope for social justice, a light of hope for meeting human needs. The pastors and clergy in the Henrico Ministers Conference are working diligently to keep the worshipers and our community connected virtually. We're grateful to have 4 daycares, and we're also appreciative of the food banks that several of the pastors have within the structure of their churches. We're working with churches, civic organizations, Henrico County Public Schools, because we love and we care about people. And we invite you to visit Henrico Ministers Conference Facebook page, where you'll find a lot of these strategies, virtual church, in helping to keep our worshipers, keep our community connected. We also want to take time for you to understand that real issues are being resolved, but this is an evolving process, new to all of us. But be encouraged that through the study of God's word, through the power of prayer, this will help to empower us. It will help to strengthen us and will help to keep us, because God can, and God will see us through this crisis within a crisis. I need you. You need me. We need each other to survive. So Facebook friends, people in our community and clergy, family, may God's richest blessings be bestowed upon you and your family. And remember our theme, unity in our community. It gives us power to work together to continue to do a greater work. Blessings, peace, safety, and health for all. And so for now, good night.